Okay. All right, colleagues, it's 2 o'clock, so can I welcome all members and officers to this hybrid meeting of the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Everybody here okay? Yeah, good. This meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone who may be watching remotely. We don't have anyone else in the chamber, by the way, in terms of public seats. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting is concluded, should anyone else also wish to view it. Please be aware that this meeting is being transcribed only for the purpose of producing the minutes. This transcript will be deleted once the committee approves the minutes, and the transcript should not be downloaded by anyone other than Democratic Services. To confirm, as a council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification requests to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be in English, conducted in English only. Can I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when not talking so that there don't get any interference or interruption. I should also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under Section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are present attending the meeting, as well as members of the public, etc., who are viewing the meeting. So can I ask that you use your cameras on, please, for the duration of the meeting, and we'll move on to the agenda. So, firstly, Niall, can I just check, confirm that we received any apologies?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Liam Cowles, Norma Parish, Nick Byrne, Nick Simons, Nathan Yole, Caroline Price, Colette Thomas and Alan Slade.
Chair, apologies from Councillor Janet Jones. She's currently in another meeting currently and she's going to be joining in about 15 minutes.
Thank you for that. Right, so we move on to item 2, which is the declarations of interest. Can I ask members to state whether they have any declarations of interest, please? I see no hands, so we're okay there. So we move on to item 3, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting on the 23rd of September. Members, are you happy to approve those minutes as an accurate record? Yes, I see hands in raised. Any abstentions or any against? No? Okay, those are carried. And then we move on to item 4, which was the action sheet, which is on page 11 of your papers. Members, could you confirm whether you have any questions or are you happy to accept the action sheet? Yep, all okay? Great, thank you very much. Okay, so we move on to item 5, the substantive item for this meeting, which is the Climate and Nature Emergency Annual Performance Report for 24-25. So the purpose of this report is to provide the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Committee with an update on the work taken in the last year to address the action set out in the Climate and Nature Emergency Action Plan. I do love the way these things trip off the tongue. I'm sure we can get something shorter and sweeter in due course. And to present the Council's net zero reporting data for 24-25. I'd like to give thanks at this point to Climate Action Torvine, who took the opportunity to submit a number of comments and observations in relation to the plan, which I know have been shared with members and was very helpful. So I welcome the officers and executive member for Waste and Sustainability. I'll hand over to Councillor Morgan, and I think then perhaps after Councillor Morgan, if the officers present introduce themselves, that would be helpful for members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers the 3rd year of delivery of our programme of work to respond to the twin challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss. I'm grateful for the opportunity to introduce the report today. It shows the progress we're making in addressing these urgent and compelling issues. We know that our local efforts are a small part of a huge global challenge, but we owe it to our grandchildren to do all we can to slow and reverse the impact that we're already seeing, and which, without real commitment from us all, could completely blight their future. So, with that sober note behind us, onto the progress. With this year seeing Wales celebrating and reflecting on 10 years of the groundbreaking Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, our approach is a good example of how we're thinking about the longer term, aiming to prevent problems occurring and working more closely with our communities. Many of the Council's activities have a role to play in responding to the climate-nature emergencies, and we deliver our services in integrated ways that maximise the wellbeing benefits that they deliver. For example, investing in and improving school facilities in ways that consider net zero, and making improvements to active travel routes that not only support people to move around more easily, to access employment, training, or connect with friends, but also help to reduce our carbon emissions. Also, our work to support local nature means that more people can experience the health and well-being benefits that a thriving local environment can provide. A wide variety of activity has been undertaken throughout 24-25, including the designation of a new local nature reserve, a new nature play area at Bagley Court with pupils from Woodlands Community Primary School, working with Pontypool Community Council to install Swift boxes, supporting community energy projects, and installing an impressive 4 heat pumps at our council sites, with a 5th site already nearing completion. So most of the actions, 81%, set out in the annual delivery plan are on target or have already been completed. In terms of reaching net zero 2030, emissions under our direct control have remained largely stable, which is an indication that the efficiency behaviour we've been implementing is becoming entrenched, so that's a very good sign. Additional investment in efficiency measures for our buildings has been agreed and installation is underway, meaning that further carbon reductions are expected in future years, with every kilowatt hour of energy saved resulting in a financial saving for the Council. But going forward, maintaining that discipline will be becoming increasingly important as the low-hanging fruit in terms of additional reduction has now been picked. We know there's still a lot of work to be done, but this work and the wider benefits it provides for our communities continues to be a priority for the Council. I welcome the input of this scrutiny committee to the work we're doing across the Council and in our wider leadership role across our communities. Thank you, and I'll hand now to Mark Thomas.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Chair, as you said, would you like the officers to introduce themselves first or as they speak? Which would you prefer?
Perhaps, Mark, if you could advise who's present and then each of them could perhaps just briefly say who they are, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Chair, could I defer to officers in the chamber first, please?
Okay, so perhaps if I start, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Committee. Andrew Lovegrove, Secretary Director of Resources.
Thank you. Rachel.
Rachel O'Shaughnessy, Environmental and Sustainability Manager.
Good afternoon, I'm Grenville Ham, I'm Energy Manager.
And online? Dan?
Yeah. Hi there, Dan Morelli, Head of Public Protection and Environment.
John?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm John Paxton. I'm the Strategy and Development Manager within Ardal and Cardiff Council, so advising on procurement related issues.
Okay. And Michelle?
Hi there, Michelle Mitchell, Head of Highways and Transportation.
Okay. David, I think you're there.
Hi all, Dave Leach, Deputy Chief Exec.
Jason?
Hi, Jason Lewis, Director of Corporate Services.
And I think we have Louise as well.
Hi, Louise Powell, Environment Operations Manager.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, Mark, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. Much appreciated. So it's Mark Thomas, Director, Neighbourhoods and Environment. Councillor Morgan has obviously given a comprehensive introduction, so with your permission I'll take you through a whistle-stop tour of the report, as I'm sure members have already gone through this in detail. But so there's some of the key elements I'd like to draw out, subject to your approval, members, is that it's pleasing that all the 24-25, one of the key messages is that 81% of our actions set out in the annual delivery plan have been completed. So that's very encouraging. Project Apollo has been a success, particularly in behavioural change and how we manage our buildings across the corporate piece as well. So we've had significant investment funded from council capital reserves, but especially in terms of making our heating systems far more efficient, fitting photovoltaic panels on schools to make them more resilient and less prone to the energy surges in price in terms of that we've experienced previously. That obviously helps them manage budgets better and in a more consistent way. We started working on what we feel to be sort of emerging technology as well, in terms of putting 4 heat pumps into some of our areas as well, into some of our buildings. That's proven to be a good learning curve for us as well. So I'm not going to tell members it's been a runaway success, but it's been a very, very good learning curve for us as well. And as we move forward, I'm sure we'll be bringing those technologies forward as well. So the report covers we made significant strides in the 4 sections, the 4 work streams that we made, and obviously you'll know that the more detail is covered in Appendix 1. But as I said, Section 4 of the report covers the main 4 work streams that we're moving up towards in terms of achieving our ambitions. But also, if I could take members really that those 4 work streams, I think, going forward will form key elements of our plan, that our deal that we're developing with our communities going forward, and in particular as well work stream 5, which focuses on sort of resilient and empowered communities. And as I'm sure you can see, those 4 work streams will be key in terms of achieving our ambitions towards that as well. So while it's not picked up on the report, I think that's something we need to be mindful of going forward. Section 4.5 and 4.6 I think are very useful to highlight, because they detail emissions under the Council's direct control. So that shows we're making good progress. 4.6 though really shows where we've got our challenge, in terms of our greatest challenge, because these are areas outside of our direct control. And combined with Welsh Government's amendments to the reporting methodologies, which have changed from year to year as well, is creating a level of uncertainty through which we have to navigate as well. So that's something members might want to look at as well. So 4.9, section 4.9, covers the key successes of each of our 4 work streams, which is pleasing to read. And obviously, I'm sure members have gone through that in detail. And then obviously 4.10 details what we're delivering during the current year. But what I want to check on, cover as well really, is section 6, which is financial and our risk to delivering our objectives. And what we're looking at more and more now is that we are working on a regional basis. Our supply chain, so John is here as well, but the supply chains will work, and I know Ardal have done a lot of good work in trying to map our carbon footprint in terms of our supply chains, but that's something, again, not within our direct control, and is therefore a potential risk for us. I wanted to speak to members as well and guide members perhaps about affordability is something that we're looking at as well. So whilst we are providing significant support where we can, and we've had significant capital support from the council, Gren has been very, very successful as well in harvesting capital grant from Welsh Government and various sources. We do have a point where there's not a level playing field in terms of costs of vehicles and materials. So what officers are looking at, subject to obviously members' approval, is that we're having a phased approach. We're projecting that some of the materials and vehicle costs will come down and reduce in future years, and we're making a sort of a calculated approach that we will hold that investment to ensure that we get maximum benefit for any investment that we give as well. So that's one area. The other area is technology. This is an area where technology is emerging at the moment, and we're not there yet, members. There is a significant way to go in terms of if we're transitioning our large fleet, our HGVs over to electric or other fuel means. We have had some reliability issues with that. The smaller fleet, I think we're there in terms of technology, but certainly the HGVs is still, there's a way to go, so the industry has some progress to make as well. Obviously, we're working with our partners in industry and across the region as well to have those conversations. But it's important to manage expectations both with nationally and at a local level as well, in terms of the pace at which we can go towards a full transition to electric, bearing in mind that obviously the limited budgets available to us as well. But rest assured, members, we're doing all we can to ensure that we do so in a cost-effective way. You'll see, obviously, coming up to section 8, well, obviously, is the suggested scrutiny activity, which I'm sure you're well aware of, and just really to demonstrate that commitment, you'll see before you a whole range of officers that are ready to try their best to answer any questions and talk you through any issues or concerns that you have. And at that point, I'll defer back to the Chair, if I may.
Thank you very much, Mark. I think that's sort of given us a good, clear steer on that. So just to advise members that John Paxton can't be with us throughout the whole meeting, so if there are any procurement questions, we'll look at taking those first that are directed towards him. So just to give you that note of advice, and I'll open it up. I suggest that try and have a little bit of structure to this. Perhaps we'll deal with the main report and then go on to the delivery plan performance elements if people have got questions. So starting with the main report, which is pages 13 to 22. Are there any member questions to come in on that, please? Okay, Councillor Steve Evans.
I've got two. Hopefully they'll be quick ones. Overall, we started with 0% of doing any environmental stuff. So where are we on a percentage? Say it's over an 11-year period and we need 10% every year. Where are we at to get the 100% to be ready for 20? Whatever. So that's the first bit. And the question I'm still asking, we're making all the assumptions and planting extra trees and everything else. Do we know what we actually got in Torvine? That was the question I brought up the last time. By how many trees, how many hedges, how many shrubs we got? Because we're making these assessments, and if we don't know the factual information, how are we getting to these figures? Hopefully that'll come forward.
Okay, I think despite there being two questions, I think they're nice and clear. So who would like to pick up first on that? I think Gren's put his hand up, so Gren, over to you.
Thank you. Now, I'll try and answer the question, but there's an awful lot to unpick within all of this. If we look at the carbon emissions that the council directly control, we call those Scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that includes all the emissions associated with our buildings, our street lighting, our vehicles, and business commuting. We can directly control that, and we have a number of plans in place to go for the most cost-effective interventions to drive down those costs, which is really the number of units consumed. So as a result, that also then drives down the emissions. Rather crudely, for our buildings from our first year in 2019-2020 to now, or I should say last financial year, we've driven down the emissions by 40%. For our fleet, it's around about 35%, and similar for our business travel and for our street lighting. For business travel, much of that saving has actually been on the basis that people are utilising technology, as we can see from many of the people who are there. But in total now, the CO2 emissions that we directly control is now 7,000 tonnes. Taking into account the second part of the question, we also know, although relatively crudely, that the amount of carbon that we offset from all of our land holdings, so that's the trees that is on the land that the council owns itself, so not the entire borough, that offsets carbon emissions by around about 3,000 tonnes. So we've brought down, so we're now looking at around about 4,000 in net terms. I think it's unrealistic to assume we will drive down our emissions to zero, but what we were, in an ideal world, we're going to drive down our emissions to such an extent that they are then offset by the carbon that is sequestered by the trees, the grass, by the land that we manage. And it is our intention to improve our understanding and the level of detail that we have for our land holdings in the amount of carbon that they sequester. I think I've answered your question, but please follow up with the counter if you want more information.
Councillor Evans, did you want to come back, or is that helpful?
Yeah, no, what I want in an easy term, and I totally appreciate everything you said, but what I'm trying to get the answer of is where are we percentage-wise in achieving our goal? Whether it be 30% in reaching our goal, 50%, or not even there. That's all I wanted with that particular part of the question. To get to that 100%, how far are we away from that, you know?
Okay, I think Mark would like to come in to add a little.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Councillor Evans. It's something. It's a very, very good question. It's something we wrestle with constantly. So it's a very good question. The issue I think that we're trying to get to is that the 2030 target, whilst we've been ambitious in terms of saying this council will reach net zero by 2030, the Welsh or the official target is that public services will reach net zero by 2030. So there is a lot of expectations that we will work with our partners. To be blunt, Councillor Evans, on our own, in Torfaen or any other council on its own, independently, I doubt we will reach the net zero target by 2030. But that is because we have been overly ambitious and set ourselves. This council will reach net zero by 2030. But as I say, the legislative target is that the public services. So we will be reliant on some of the other big players, such as the big landowners, such as Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Government, to really come in and provide us with that additional net savings. However, we're not going to rest on our laurels and think that we'll just wait for someone to come and rescue us. We're doing all we can, and we're making good progress already. So does that answer your questions, Councillor Stevens, as far as I can go? Sorry, Councillor Evans, as far as I can go.
Hey, I've known you a long time. You know me my first name and my second name. Yeah, and all I was just trying to work out is by the 2030, whether we've achieved like 50%, and whether the other so many years is realistic to reach the target. I know you said we're not going to reach the target, but I haven't had a figure of sort of like we're there 60% or we're there 50%. That's all I wanted, just the actual figure, you know.
Yeah, right. Now, Chair, can I come back on that, please?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so sorry, Councillor Evans. It's a case of, yeah, at the moment, from the areas that we can control, we're making about 30%. We've done 30% of the hard work at the moment, and we're looking to increase travel at that rate of progress. The issue that we've got is the indirect elements that we don't control. That is proving a harder nut to crack at the moment. So on the emissions that we do control, we've made 30% progress at this current time.
I think that's nice and clear. Is that helpful, Councillor Evans? Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I was looking for, but I got a lot of other good stuff, so That was excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
And I think, you know, let's bear in mind, members, we may have some recommendations to make in terms of things that we'd like to see. So perhaps something on a diagrammatic might be something to consider in the future. But I've got Councillor Jane Watkins, and then I've got Councillor Nick Horler. Oh, Councillor Lucy Williams, sorry. And are you both on a question? That's fine. Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Watkins first. Goodness me, the people in the chamber are harder to manage than those outside. There we are. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question relates to delivering the electric vehicle charging strategy. I just wondered if we're keeping a close eye on alternatives to electric, and if we've got any idea of how close we are to moving on to something else, like hydrogen vehicles, and potentially might there come a point in the not too distant future where this objective gets derailed? Is it a risk of being derailed because, you know, we're moving on to other types of vehicles?
I think it's a good question. I don't know who'd like to answer it. I'm looking towards Gren.
Thank you. So the first part, we've been actively developing electric charging facilities, both for our communities, for our fleet and for our commuters. I think we've been relatively successful, and we certainly secured a lot of support and external funding to deliver on that. In terms of the wider market, so will we see the integration of hydrogen? I think it's almost certainly yes, but there's no real clarity of the pace with which that will happen. We've got within our local energy area plan, so this is organised and coordinated on a Cardiff Capital Region basis, an ambition over the next 5 years to identify key locations where hydrogen facilities can be deployed. That might not necessarily be in Torvine. So it's very much on the radar regionally to develop this infrastructure, but I think it's fair to say that the market isn't quite ready for that deployment. But I think you are quite right in your assumption that that there will be multiple alternatives in the years ahead. However, I'm reasonably certain that electric vehicles will stay on the simple premise that a lot of households will invest in solar panels and they will be able to directly charge up their vehicles themselves, which I think will be one of its key strengths and ensure that it will also be around in the long run.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that was very helpful, but I gather Michelle might like to add a comment here.
No, Councillor, nothing further from me, thank you.
And Mark had a hand up and then down again, so I assume you're okay, Mark? Yep. Okay. Right. I'll move on then to, we've got two questions from the Chamber, Councillor Lucy Williams and then Councillor Nick Horler. Then I've got Councillor Linda Chandler and Councillor Janet Jones. So, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back to the working out of the bringing the emissions down from the council to by 2030. So it was just to clarify my understanding. So you were saying when we're looking at net zero, that's the actual reduction of emissions, but also the offsetting. Is that right? So that's kind of like an understood thing when you say net zero. It's not just the. So that's for the 30. For the 2030 target for the council and for the 2050 target for the sort of wider community. You always have to look at those two elements, reduction and offsetting. So you were saying before that part of that offsetting, you'd also be looking to the wider landowners and things like that. So it's quite, that offsetting thing's actually significantly important, isn't it? Right, so that's I wanted to just understand that. That's sufficient for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, so I think Gren, perhaps you're happy to.
I was simply just to verbally confirm. I was nodding along, and you are correct in your assumption. So just so those who couldn't see.
Thank you. That is helpful because nods are a little bit undiscernible on the screen, I suspect. Okay, Councillor Horler.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Indirect emissions. indirect emissions are emissions that the council can't influence over. So can I ask what influence you can do and what influence you are doing to help reduce that? I know, for example, currently there is a potential business in Torvine that is offering a percentage of discount if the person turns up either in an electrical vehicle or comes by public transport, which is then reducing their carbon footprint because people that are utilising that business will gain from it, but also the carbon footprint of that business. So, in real terms, what is Torvine really doing to be able to reduce what's coming in on that carbon? And you say it's very difficult to calculate it, but surely there must be a percentage that you could look at by the vehicles or what home circling in there that's coming in that could impact on reducing our emissions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know Gren would like to come in, and I'll maybe give John an opportunity if he wants to come in after Gren.
So, thank you for the question. I'll answer the first bit, but I'll set aside the procurement elements, because I think John is far better placed to answer that. But basically, there's 4 areas of emissions, 4 primary areas. It's the goods and services we procure, our supply chain, and there is carbon emissions associated with everything those businesses or suppliers will do. So we can't dictate to them, you must have green energy, you must install that, but we can influence local companies by, for example, providing support programs via Shared Prosperity Fund to help businesses decarbonise and install renewable energy technologies that will bring down their bills. Some of the other areas which will have probably a little bit more influence would be, for example, our commuting, how our staff travel to and from work. And there's 2 principal areas there. One is the adoption of the flexible working policy, so we know staff don't come in quite as often as, or certain staff, shall I say, don't come in every single day of the week. That will reduce those emissions. And we've implemented, with support from Transport for Wales, putting in electric vehicle chargers at a number of sites, particularly at our schools, so that staff who wouldn't necessarily be able to charge at home could definitely charge at work, and that might be the impetus for them to change their vehicles. So we're calling those sort of like carrots to try and influence behaviour, but we can't dictate how you travel to work. And there's been other changes as well. So in terms of implementing bike to work policies, washing facilities, and equally, if you're doing your work travel, you can actually claim mileage if you're cycling. And what we're currently doing, funny enough and timely, I was having a discussion with HR this morning, is implementing mechanisms which can track that data better and using that data to come up with new proposals to help nudge people further down that line. So whilst we can't, when we say we can't control it, we can influence, we can guide, and we can basically make it easier for people to adopt these sort of practices that will drive down their emissions. But I'll now pass over to John to answer from the supply chain perspective.
Okay, John?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, there's a lot happening in this world. I suppose one of the key things is communication. So obviously working with Rachel and the team in Torvine and the other Ardal councils, we've developed quite a short animation, really good animation, I think, that is aimed at not just officers, but SMEs and business. And we've used social media to push that out. And we've got an infographic based on that animation ready and primed to go. So again, it's around raising awareness of what people can do. In terms of the procurement processes, we have a key document as part of the procurement process, which is something called a pre-tender report form, which is authorization to go out to issue the tender, and we've strengthened that in terms of questions we ask around carbon. And we're also working with RAP Cymru, who are experts in this field, looking at using artificial intelligence and Copilot so that those procuring can put in some basic information about what they're looking to buy, and we'll have a pool of information they can fit in, and it will fish in, and it will suggest ideas for what they can build into the specification to reduce carbon emissions and encourage kind of circular procurement behaviours. It's all around, I suppose, we want people to buy less, buy better, use better and use longer. So we're doing lots around that. One of the key challenges is the reporting, though. At the moment, we use proxy information. That is, we use basically the more we spend, everything we spend, there's a factor that applies to each pound, and that's how we get the carbon footprint. And that's based on information issued by business, energy and investment strategy departments in the UK government. And I think, as others have said on this call, those coefficients change on an annual basis, which makes comparison on a year-on-year basis impossible, basically. But it's also very crude in terms of accuracy. It's probably plus or minus 30%. So we're looking to move to something called Tier 2, which is more industry standard based on the kind of volumes that organisations are using of particular things. And we've been part of a Welsh Government Energy Service pilot, which the first phase concluded in the summer this year. And that involved suppliers providing information and testing out a spreadsheet. I think the feedback wasn't extremely positive, so there's going to be a phase 2 now where they're looking to collect information on an improved tool and just collect it once for Wales, because basically if Cardiff were working with a contractor that Torfaen were working with, that poor contractor would have to fill in the information twice, which is frustrating. So hopefully there will be a tool emerging that we can use across Wales. I probably missed something really obvious, but happy for any follow-up questions. But yeah, there's a lot happening. And key to that as well, I should add, we've got a specialist member of the team now who joined in March time. So Erin works closely with Rachel and the team in terms of pushing this agenda and improving the communications and working with the Welsh Energy Service and others, the South East Wales Procurement Network, so that we can really strengthen our approach to reducing carbon.
That's quite comprehensive. I think Councillor Hall would like to come back on something.
Thank you, Chair. Taking this one step further, we're talking about indirect emissions of suppliers. We're talking about chains. We're talking about our staff coming to working from home, working from home. But we also have quite a few schools within Torfaen that every day a parent gets into a car and takes that person to school and then goes home and then comes back. Whilst I fully understand that active travel is progressing in a positive way, surely the amount of indirect emissions that are coming from pupils travelling to school in vehicles instead of walking or using push bikes is another area that we are dealing with. I am fully aware of that, but is it something that we need to push a bit harder so we can reduce the amount of emissions that are coming into our schools? And let's face it, those emissions are potentially dangerous for those children that go because of the amount of fumes and everything else. It opens the doors for health and everything else for those people to be fitter going to school. Is that something that we can really push within this policy?
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Horner. I think Mark's wanting to come in. I don't know if it's on this point, but I'll give him the opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's to cover the two the points that we've made, really. One about obviously procurement, and the other one about Councillor Horner's point about education. So I'll do the second one first, I guess, which is the easiest one, I guess, being point of least resistance. So, Councillor Horner, you're right, you're spot on in terms of active travel is currently doing so much at the moment. But again, that's very much reliant on investment as well. And again, referring back to our developing deal that we're going to have with our communities as well, it's about engagement with them, empowering them and supporting and working collaboratively together, so that we're talking about development of potential walk-in buses, so the community pulls together and jointly encourages and escorts children to and from school. That's been quite successful in other areas as well. Again, reducing the need for people to travel and transport a single child to school via a motor vehicle. Ultimately, though, we will work with our communities on that, and then obviously through engagement to raise that awareness through the schools, and ultimately enforcement as well, to ensure that people park responsibly and park away from the schools. So, you know, trying to address the need for every parent to actually drive their child into the car, into the classroom, understanding that they need to keep a zone away from the school so that they can do the last part of the journey if they have to drive by foot as well. So I think there's real opportunities there, Councillor Hall, going forward. I'm quite excited about that in terms of that deal that we have, that we're developing, and the work that we're going to undertake, engaging with our communities and empowering them as well. Going on from John's point, really, John, I think you covered everything really well. The only thing we're mindful of as well, and again, this links to what we're developing as well, is that obviously with the most recent changes in our procurement, we are obliged, where possible as well, to engage more local SMEs. So that automatically reduces the carbon footprint in terms of the companies we're using, and hopefully sort of haulage routes and employment, the need for skilled staff to travel to our area to work. So that local sort of industry, developing that is key, and obviously that's part and a central part of Christina Harry's economic regeneration strategy as well, both across Torfaen and Blaenau Gwent as well. So we're looking at how we can develop that economy, build that SME, build that skill set and that work, that skill base as well locally, as opposed to having to import and either materials or skills into our area. So I hope that covers those 2 points, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think that was very, very clear and concise. I note we've lost a couple of members, so I'm just checking, are we still quorate? I think we are, because I know Councillor Jones has managed to join us. So Gren wants to come in, but I'm conscious we've got a couple of members waiting, so can it be quick?
Just to quickly follow up on Councillor Horner's question, you're dead right in terms of the emissions associated with commuting to school. That would fall within our ambition of net zero by 2050, because that's really a household emission. But you're particularly helpful for you to identify the impact on health of the emissions from the fuels by reducing those emissions that those are directly associated with it, whether that's via active travel, whether that's a shift to low emission transport. That will directly dovetail in with our Marmot ambitions, which is improving health outcomes for our residents, and the longer term impacts that will have on our society will be very, very significant.
No, thank you for the emphasis on the health point there. I'm assured we are quorate, by the way, members, so we are okay to proceed. Councillor Clarkson, and I apologise for getting your name wrong earlier.
Thank you, Chair, and no problems with that. Two of my questions have already just been answered, but I will go on to ask another one. It is very relevant. So around 4.81 of the report, safe routes in communities. I see that there's been a delay, a stall on that due to a funding bid which wasn't successful. So I'm sort of wondering what the issues are. Funding is always going to be a challenge, and it's always going to be about strong, successful bids. So whether or not we've got any sort of knowledge gained, lessons learned, how confident we are that the next bid that we put in may be successful, because safe routes in communities seems key to everything around active travel.
No, thank you. I think that's a nice, helpful question. So I don't know who'd like to pick that up. I'm looking towards Rachel and Gren. Are you happy to, or Mark? Michelle. Okay. Over to you, Michelle.
Oh, thanks, Councillor Clarkson. Yes, a very good question. Like you say, that fits in nicely, like you say, with the active travel work. Yes, unfortunately, we have been unsuccessful with the safe routes in the community bids. But on the plus side, I think that's because lots of the data that we need to provide to support the bid is around accidents around schools. and it's those accidents whereby they've been killed or seriously injured. Unfortunately, we haven't had those casualties within Torfaen, so hence why when we submit a bid, it hasn't been successful, and that is the feedback that we have had back from Welsh Government. However, we will continue to submit bids. Our bids moving forward from next financial year will be going through the Corporate Joint Committee, and we've already raised areas of concern to those and put potential schemes forward to them. So we're currently gathering all the information and we'll be submitting bids to the CJC in hope that we will get some funding to make improvements in 26-27. So I'll keep you appraised of those.
That's very helpful. Is that okay, Councillor Clarkson?
It sort of answers questions. Any lessons learned, it would be that it was the type nature of the funding that was being bid for. So whether or not there's any other funding streams out there that could maybe take on smaller, less ambitious packages within that safer routes in communities.
Yes, sure. And what we're looking to do there, Councillor Clarkson, is sort of build those schemes within our active travel core allocation. So again, for next year, we'll look to do some development work on those so we can sort of build up potential designs where we see there are key areas for improvement.
Right, yeah. Thanks for that. It'd be good to get more information in that in the future. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure.
I think that's very helpful, and I think, you know, that's obviously an opportunity for those of us who sit on scrutiny for the CJC to perhaps be aware of as well. I know Mark wanted to come in, but I'm also conscious John can't stay with us very much longer. I'll ask Mark to come in, but then I'll ask if members, I'll bring in Janet, and then I'll ask if there's any procurement-related questions. So Mark, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Very, very quickly. Councillor Clarkson, going on from your question, really, there has been discussion over the last couple of years as well about the number of different grants that the Welsh Government are offering, and whether or not you want to sort of consolidate those under a more overarching grant. And so issues such as the Welsh Government Road Safety Grant, the Safe Routes in Communities and Active Travel, there has been discussion about just perhaps merging those into a larger grant that's more straightforward to bid for, because ultimately they all have the same goal, which is obviously delivering our most vulnerable part of our community, either protecting them or delivering our children to school safely. So that's the thought process going forward. We do take it very personally when we don't get grants, and we do obviously challenge back to understand what's going on, and we are very competitive with other authorities as well, so we want more than our lion's share, so we do go back and challenge.
Thank you. I think we feel reassured that that's the case. So I'll move on to Councillor Janet Jones.
Thanks, Chair. Two questions. I'll go the first for the active travel. Are all our schools engaging in active travel? Because I'm sure Mark knows that one or two schools might not be participating as well as we should. And what are we going to try and educate them and trying to get gentle persuasion? The second one is relating to the charging point. Have we identified any gaps where more electric charging points should be positioned?
Okay, I think Mark would like to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jones. Yes, there's a mixture in terms of the consultation we have and the engagement with schools, and I'm keen not to draw any criticism of schools, but obviously some schools have a greater capacity to engage and others don't, for various reasons. But what we need to do is trying to assist the schools where we feel that we need their engagement. We do need their engagement. Any bid that we put in that hasn't got meaningful engagement with the school community is destined to fail.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. So yeah, we're working closely with schools, and again, we can do all we can, but we do try to, work closely with those areas. Charging points, I guess I'll defer to Gren if I may, but yes, there are obvious charge points, sort of holes in our charge point strategy at the moment in terms of where we want to deploy. But and if Gren, if you want to come in and add to that, but. If Gren doesn't, obviously we're constantly looking to sort of enhance and expand that.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. So to follow up, in terms of electric vehicle charging, predominantly we've installed them so far on public car parks. The funding that has previously been available is not available for us in the future. So we've got a brief period of probably of pausing on that. But I can say that our chargers are not fully utilised at the moment. So I think it's fair to say that the capacity is currently sufficient. However, we are mindful that the big gap is on-street charging, particularly in residential areas. Our colleagues in Blaenau Gwent and in Newport have been trialling on-street chargers, a number of different techniques. There's a lot of complexity there, which involves shared liability, often between the council and the householder, and so on and so forth. Those trials will be concluding towards the end of this financial year, and we'll be very keen to pick up what has been successful and, where applicable, begin to deploy that. But it will be, just to reiterate, there isn't currently funding to do that at the moment, but it will be something that we will be looking to install if those trials prove that it is a successful approach.
Thank you for that. Is that okay, Councillor Jones?
Yes, that's, I think perhaps that's something we can consider, you know, getting an increase in budget to establish more charging points. But I appreciate the difficulty we can have, especially when it comes to streets with terraced properties, etc. So it's going to be an ongoing issue, I think, for many years to come.
Yes, I think it's helpful, though, to know that a trial is underway, and I'm sure that's one of the things as a committee we'll want to perhaps ask about going forward. Okay, I have Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question's around Workstream 2, and it's sort of a funding issue again. It's really heartening to see the progress that's been made with community buildings, community halls, and getting them set up with solar panels. It's a huge part about making these community buildings more resilient, which fits into, you know, all of our ambitions going forward. But there's not been much mention of funding for future years. So I was just wondering, have we got any surety on funding streams going forward, or are we going to be in the same difficult position regarding looking for it, or whether or not we're managing to identify any funding streams that maybe the community could be applying for as well, and maybe help out with match funding from various sources? What efforts are we putting into getting the rest of our community buildings up to spec?
Yep, that's a very helpful question. I know Gren wants to come in, and then David Leach as well. So Gren first.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And again, I'd like to reiterate what you said. It's been one of my proudest achievements since working for Torvine, is seeing the number of local community centres and sports clubs that have benefited from these technologies. I'm often reminded of our contact at Able Radio, who said during the summer they were saving £1,000 a month on their energy bill, which is fantastic. We have secured Shared Prosperity Fund for this financial year, so we are looking to support. I think we've agreed to support 15 further community centres, and we've got a short list of another 10 we'll be looking to support over the coming months. And we have been working with a number of other funders to match fund what we've been putting in, which would include Sports Wales, includes National Lottery, and I think in some really sort of pioneering work by Cwmbran Town Council in providing match funding to support a number of these initiatives. In terms of the longer term, we're entering a period of uncertainty. However, the Local Growth Fund that was announced by the UK Government that's going to be administered by the Welsh Government does have within it one of its key pillars is clean energy support, and our hope is that that will therefore result in something very similar to be deployed next financial year. But I think everybody is still awaiting what those final details will be.
Thank you for that. I'll bring in Dave Leach, and then just check that you're okay with that, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Not a huge amount for me to add to what Gren said there. I think that's absolutely right about assessing the level of priority that needs to go to community group grants from any future Welsh Government funding or UK Government funding. The only thing I would add, though, is that as part of that, we'll be working closely with Torfaen Voluntary Alliance to help them advise groups on other funding sources that we as a council may not be able to apply to, but community groups may have access to. So there may be other sources of funding through that route beyond those bigger areas that Gren's already discussed.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. So, Councillor Clarkson, is that okay, or that answer your question?
If I can just ask a supplementary, we've got some of our community groups that are still waiting. That you know, they got bids in, but they haven't been successful in this year's sort of round. They're clinging on by their fingertips. So it's about how much priority we're putting into informing our community groups of the likelihoods, timescales, so that they can actually do some business planning of their own to try and keep themselves afloat until this precious resource comes in. It's great to hear that Able Radio is saving £1,000 a month on their energy. I've got community halls that are struggling to pay £1,500 a month for their energy supplies at the moment, and that's just looking at the electricity bills. So the communication with community groups, so that they can sort of try and put their business plans together while they cling on and wait for these resources to come forward, would be really useful.
Thank you for that. I think noted that, and I'm sure Gren's nodding. So I'm sure there'll be a not unexpected recommendation probably coming forth in that direction.
Thanks.
Okay, I have Councillor Steve Evans.
Yeah, following from that good question from Linda, the only thing is, with the funding, my only particular concern is the timelines you have to use it by. Sometimes they are very short windows, and it's extremely difficult to get the work done in the timelines. So, unfortunately, there are a lot of groups are missing out because of this, and perhaps it's something we may need to look at from Welsh Government and ask them, is it possible to give us a bit more time, even down to get the work done and the contractor, you know. So, as you can appreciate, I'm fully supportive of all that, but it's just the timelines. I've had plenty of experience with this, so as you can appreciate, I know about it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Evans. I think that's an important point. Obviously, the timeline for spending grant can be quite challenging. I think Mark would like to come in, presumably in response to this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. It's a good point, Councillor Evans, and it's something that we've wrestled with for years in terms of allocation of grant and the expectations that it'll be allocated and you spend it within the same year. It does really hinder efficient use of that funding. That's something the Welsh Government are alive to. Numerous councils and regions, CJCs, have gone back to ask for a change. They are considering, there's two issues really, Councillor Evans, which fills me with a little bit of optimism. Number one is that Welsh Government are considering multi-year bids and allocation of monies, which is pleasing. The other thing that we're looking at as well is that they're considering allocation of monies to the CJC, so Cardiff Capital Region, and at that point they'll allocate the funding across the various authorities, and there may be some sort of level of autonomy there in terms of the time scales in which that money must be spent. So those are sort of developing themes at the moment, Councillor Evans, which does fill me with a little bit of hope.
Thank you for that. That's helpful to be aware of. Has that been helpful, Councillor Evans? Yep.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when the money's there, then you miss it because you can't reach the deadlines. As Councillor Clarkson said, you know, you do take it personally because you tried your utmost to get these grants funded and done for your things in your ward. So yeah, I appreciate that. You know, it's something that has to be looked at because it does affect all members of all wards and all community centres. So thank you for that, Mike.
Yeah, and just to add, I know from experience from a couple of organisations that they've certainly found it very helpful having officers coming in to go through what measures can be taken, etc., for funding a couple of community buildings. So I think that's very positive. Now, I'm conscious that we have moved into the summary of performance, I think, quite well, but I want to give people the opportunity, if they want to pick up on the delivery plan performance elements, which start on page 39 of the report. We've delved into a couple of things in workstream 2, but just checking if there's anything anybody wants to raise in relation to workstream 1, which is on page 40 to 53 of your papers. So, Councillor Horler.
So, workstream 1, the councillor says that net zero will happen by 2030. We know it's going to cost us money to do that and investment resources. But when we get to 2030, will there be any pressure in the council to sustain net zero? Is there anything that you can foresee that will prevent that continually staying at zero all the time? Is there going to be any pressures financially where we might need to look at other options of power to actually do certain things within it? If that's vague, I'm sorry.
Yes, I think we've got the drift of that, which is
basically what I'm saying is we get to 2030, we've got to zero carbon. It's the pressures of keeping that at zero carbon long term.
Yeah, I think that it's a fair point, and I know Mark, I think, would like to come in to initially respond.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor, it's a really good question, and it's there's a multifaceted sort of approach here and issues. Number one, I suppose, is as we've learned from bitter experience through waste. You think you've reached a goal, and then obviously Welsh Government will come in or National Government will come in and change the goalposts in terms of legislative change or how they measure your performance. So that's always a risk going forward. And not to be unkind to Welsh Government here, it's a case of it is an emerging issue. And there are emerging technologies and how we measure more efficiently as well. So that's a bit of tongue-in-cheek, if I may, but there is that risk going forward. However, as we've alluded to, what we're trying our best to achieve is that carbon neutrality through a cost-effective approach. So we're waiting, as you say, we're trying to wait for invest carefully and in a phased approach so that we can take advantage of when some of these materials and some of these technologies come forward at a more cost-effective rate. So that's something that we need to be guided on. But I think if we do achieve, if we do achieve our targets, then obviously I think I don't see any additional pressures. We're making good progress as well, obviously, in terms of greening our authority as well. We've already reached the 30 by 30 target in terms of 30% of our council assets being taken over for wildlife and biodiversity. So those are the sorts of areas that are of concern to me at the moment. It's always against a backdrop of available budgets that we have, but the works that we're doing at the moment are making our assets more financially efficient as well as sort of carbon neutral. So we're building in good practices and resilience, and that's something that we can be working very, very closely with our communities going forward as well as part of the deal to make our communities more resilient and self-sufficient. So I think we've got the right sort of measures planned, and we'll be judged then on the success over the next couple of years of how we actually roll that out and engage our communities.
Okay, I think that's been quite helpful. I know Councillor Morgan would like to come in, and Gwen's got a couple of points to add. So, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Horler, for that question. I think, if I'm reading you correctly, the concern about the wider context in which climate change and the nature emergency are tackled might be underlying your question, and it's a concern that I share. because the work that Torfaen is doing, and many other authorities across Wales and the UK are doing, is exemplary and desperately needed, given the urgency of the situation. To me, the biggest risk is in the wider context, where there are those who, despite all the evidence to the contrary, seem determined to doubt that climate change is having the impact that it is, or that it will have the impact that all the evidence strongly points to happening. And I think it's in that context that we have to say that sustaining behaviours from all of us that recognise that this is real, that we all have a responsibility to live slightly differently, and to be prepared to compromise on some of the ways we've lived before in the interests of our grandchildren and their futures, is so important. So I think that the Council is doing all that it can and will continue to do so and to set up good frameworks. But I would urge everyone to consider their role as ambassadors for the need to do more, to do it faster, to do it more urgently, and to do it in the interests of future generations. So thanks for your question, Nick.
Thank you for that. And I'll let Gwen come in quickly, and then...
Yeah, and just very quickly, so if we were to fully decarbonise things within our control by 2030, a lot of that is predicated on good behaviour. We're not wasteful, and they will be the things we will always have to be on top of and maintain. But and then come 2030, our shift will very suddenly shift to 2050, which is the wider borough, all of our businesses, all of our households. I think equally around about 2030 timelines we'll start to see some quite disruptive technology coming online, particularly utilising AI, which may include things like local energy markets, so people being able to buy and trade energy in a local perspective, which will fundamentally change the business case for a lot of proposals, both from ourselves, both from households and from the private sector. So I think projecting quite what we'll be doing in the 2030s now, we need to acknowledge that there's going to be some quite disruptive AI-based technologies that will be beneficial in this space.
Very interesting. So, Councillor Hawler.
Sorry, just as a caveat on this, this is a massive mindset change for not only the Council, but this is a mindset change for all the communities within Torfaen. And if we all don't get on board with this situation right now, things are not going to change. They're going to get worse. And to get to zero carbon in 2030 is great. I love that. But it's the worry that other people around us don't want to achieve that, and that worries me.
Noted. I think Gwen would like to come in briefly.
Yeah, and I'd just like to follow on from that. There's an element of equity here. We saw the massive impact that the energy price rises have had on households and their budgets, and there's a duty on us to ensure that we've insulated our residents and our population from any future price shocks. So even if they might not be interested in it as a concept, we have a duty to kind of insulate them from those potential energy shocks.
Yes, I think it's a fair point, and thank you for the question there. I see no hands for Workstream 1, so I'll go on to Workstream 2, which is pages 54 to 65, to see if members have any questions they'd like to raise in that area. And I see Councillor Watkins. Would you like to come in?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair. Actually, I've got 3 questions, but I'm happy to take them separately. So the first one is with reference to EW 7.2, talking about the community electric vehicle scheme being supported, and then it's amber, it's delayed because there's no grant support available to deliver this. So I wonder what would happen to this target then.
Are you able to reference the page, Councillor Watkins?
Yes, it is page 56.
Thank you.
This was a proposal that we were working with our colleagues in Cardiff Capital Region, which was the deployment of basically a car-sharing community electric vehicle scheme. Unfortunately, I think it was during the tendering process, they ran into some hurdles and it wasn't taken forward. So we weren't able to deliver on that locally. Our hope is this is the sort of scheme that will be delivered via the work in the Capital Cardiff Region through the local energy area plan in the coming years.
Is that helpful then, Councillor Watkins? Yep.
Yes, okay, yeah, so it's sort of out of our hands at the moment, but obviously we're going to hold on to it as an aspiration in the future, yeah, which is good. Am I okay to move on to my next question?
Yes, if it's in this work stream, please go ahead.
Yeah, so page 59, reference RE 2.8, talking about the master plan for the British. I wondered if we had a timeline of when we'll be able to move on to the feasibility work stage.
Perhaps if I go to Mark on that one. Oh, Dave Leach, thank you.
Hello, Chair. Sorry, it took me a while to take my my microphone off then. Christina, Harry has sent her apologies for today's meeting, so I'm sure we'll be able to come back to members with a more detailed update on the British. In terms of the timeline, we're still working through arrangements with the companies who'd approached us around the feasibility for the next stage of the project. That was the Idris proposal that was brought before members. There's further discussions taking place on that this week, actually, with those companies to look at the financing arrangements, taking the steer from members. We are undergoing that additional due diligence with those companies to really robustly check the status of their plans and their finance before we'll bring anything back to members to proceed with that. This will also need to link into wider discussions around Blueprint for Growth and the wider conversations that have been had with members around the status of the local development plan as well. So if it's okay with members, I'd suggest that we bring back a more detailed update in writing from Christina as the relevant director to you on that point.
That's helpful. Are you okay with that, Councillor Watkins?
Yes, yeah, no, that's good to know. Thank you. Am I okay to ask my third question, or do you want to go to somebody else?
Well, I think while we've got you on the seat, we'll ask you to
Okay,
have the last
thank you.
question.
Yeah, so moving on to page 63, W1.4. I just wondered if the plans are still under review by the officers and RAB, and do we have an expected timeline to move forward on that? Sorry, with regards to the new recycling facility.
Okay, who's going to come in on that? Mark.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a good question. So the new recycling facility, the waste transfer station, we have a site. We're going through negotiations and purchase of site, and RAP have completed a preliminary design. We're now seeking. We've put an expression of interest into Welsh Government for grant funding, and we're now looking to seek a detailed design for the waste transfer station. As you probably aware, members, we've had a number of options looking at various sites, but the most recent site has come forward, and obviously we've in the process of purchasing that site so that we can actually deliver that waste transfer station sometime in 27, if late 27, early 28.
Thank you for that. Is that okay?
Excuse me. Thank you. Yeah, it's good to know. Yeah, that it's sort of on track, and we've got an idea of when we expect it to be functioning. Thank you.
That's great. I think it's added that extra detail. Mark, I don't know if you wanted to add anything on this. You had a hand up, but no. Okay.
No, thank you, Chair.
I'll move on then to Councillor Evans, and then Councillor.
Yeah, sorry. When you first started the meeting, I missed the part of the declaration of interest. My computer was playing up, but I come in slightly later. One of the officers mentioned Bagley Court and Woodland School. Bagley Court is in my ward, and Woodland School, I'm a school governor who was part of the project, so I needed to declare an interest. And I'm not sure whether my colleague in the ward has as well. So.
I think we'll note that, and I'm sure Councillor Williams is nodding as well. So, yeah, thank you, Noel. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Did you have a question you want to ask, Councillor Evans, or shall I move on to Councillor Clarkson?
No, to move on. Something on the second part of it reminded me. So,
right, okay, Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question is around RE21, RE22, RE23, etc. Page 57 of the report, work stream 2. It's looking at the RLDP, really, isn't it? And there's mention in there of potentially identifying specific geographical areas where renewable energy generation is likely to be acceptable. But it's whether or not we're looking outside of that box. We're not looking for geographical areas, but we're looking at other ways. You look across the continent, and they're using I can't think of the word of it, car parks and things like that, where they're actually putting canopies over, and you know, the industrial buildings that we've got, supermarkets, that type of thing. We're looking at our own buildings, schools and things, but it's about having a clear understanding really of how much energy we need to generate. And I'm just wondering now, with us looking at Federation working with Blaen y Gwent, whether we're looking at how we can work collaboratively within this area as well. It's not just about finding land where you can put solar panels and wind turbines on. It's about how we can use the structures that we've got and maybe improve sort of areas and incorporate energy generation into those areas that way. And I would suspect that would be far more acceptable to a lot of the general public.
I think it's a really helpful question, and I'll go to Mark, who I think is happy to come on that.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's an excellent question. It's really tied up in our local area energy plan, and that's obviously across the region. And as you say, Councillor Clarkson, it's not just each individual authority working in isolation. There is the collaborative approach, but you're spot on. We want to maximise, and it's a term we use, which we want to sweat our assets. And what that means is that we are going to maximise our energy generation within the assets we control, as opposed to take or allow a valuable green space or other areas to be taken over for PV farms and stuff like that. We've really got to look at ourselves first and maximise what we can do with the assets that we own and we manage, rather than just constantly look at solar farms and things like that as well. So yeah, that's definitely within an integral part of the local area energy plan as well. But again, we're working collaboratively across Cardiff Capital Region to maximise those benefits and identify opportunities.
Yeah, can I just come back in on that, Shay, just to sort of say, we've got a bit of a gold rush going on with private developers of these resources at the moment. So, you know, time is of the essence in sort of looking at the priorities on this. And I suppose it's back to Welsh Government, us lobbying Welsh Government to say, well, we need clearer information about exactly what the opportunities are, how much energy we need to be generating, so that we can look at all these things in the round, because there's more and more of these private developers coming forward all the time, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, and I think you know, when we consider recommendations, we may want to consider an update to members on the local area energy plan. Just saying. I'll move on to Councillor Evans. Presumably still in this section, Councillor Evans.
Sorry, I'm back in again. First of all, I got to state the declaration again because of the food thing on page 70. It's R3.6. Deliver a community food scheme supporting third sector community food projects. First of all, I would like to say a massive thank you to the council for supporting this for the most vulnerable throughout Torfaen. Everything's looked at as a negative, but this is absolutely makes a difference. You know, for me, we need to do more, but this scheme is absolutely well appreciated by the, particularly the food banks. You know, I'm the chair of Thornhill Food Bank, as you're aware. So as you can appreciate, hopefully it'll continue, if Welsh Government will give it to us, and support the most vulnerable and needy within the communities. So a massive thank you from me.
Thank you for that, Councillor Evans. You've segued us into workstream 3, which is great, which is pages 66 to 71. So, and that was, I think, R3.5. under that so that the officers are aware. Just to check if members have got any other questions relating to Workstream 3. Councillor Lucy Williams in the chamber? No. Okay. Right. I see no hands, so I shall suggest we move to Workstream 4, which is pages 72 to 81, to see if members have got any points they'd like to highlight here. I see no hands, but I think this is probably one where, when we're talking about sort of the green infrastructure on page 72, this is probably an area that we will be picking up, I guess, in terms of some of the work under the deal. I don't know if we're talking about park management plans, and I just wanted to check that if there was anything outstanding in relation to that. Obviously, things like invasive species treatment is something that's ongoing, but any points that officers would like to note in relation to the work we've done on the park management plans? I'll look at Rachel and Mark, if I may.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Rachel, did you want to pick up anything on this?
I didn't have a specific comment in relation to park management plans, but I would agree with the Chair's comments. There's a lot of good work going on under Workstream 4. Some of it's with community groups and volunteers as well, which is really good and aligns with our aspirations around the deal. So, yeah, good.
Right, I think David Leach would like to come in as well.
Just a quick one, Chair, to say that we're starting to see parks as part of the community hub infrastructure as well. Historically, we've always seen community hubs as the buildings, the community centres. But actually, if you view a community hub as a place where people gather to make a difference to their health and well-being that offers services and activities, a park certainly meets that criteria. So one of the elements that we're factoring into the missions as part of the deal is that rethinking of the role of a community hub. So increasingly, when we start to have broader and more detailed conversations with the third sector, with community groups around the deal, the role of parks and the roles of the groups who help to maintain parks and really help keep those parks on their feet will be absolutely critical within that, just to reassure members that it is part of the deal.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. Okay. Right. Just checking if members have got any other questions that they would like to raise within this section. Okay, I see no hands, so I'll open it up then to any final questions that people would like to raise in relation to any part of the report, particularly the latter part where we've got section 3 around key projects, which I think was on pages 84 to 106. So anything that members would like to highlight or ask about? It looks like the officers have got off lightly here with this one. Okay. Oh, Councillor Evans, and then I've got a couple of comments myself. So, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, with all this, with the work scheme for change for, biodiversity and everything else, the problem is on planning, we seem to be mitigating a lot. How are we going to be able to change this? Because if we've got a climate emergency and Welsh Government are pushing us to reach these targets, then they have to be mindful when we're doing planning applications about the need to try and keep as much environmental green spaces and hedges and everything else. But if we're mitigating, we're sometimes losing great amounts. So how do we really get round this to stop this happening and affect our climate emergency responses?
Yes, I think that's a good question, because obviously it is a challenge, isn't it? We're on the one hand, planning wants to open things up to be able to have new developments created, but there is an impact on the environment. So, Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, planning is a difficult area, as you're probably aware. They're not the most popular of officers because they have to balance competing needs, bless them. So sometimes they really do struggle to please everybody, and often they don't. But in order to help them, we've got Rachel Edwards there, who's our biodiversity officer. So she's scrutinising every single planning application. We also have officers embedded in with planners as well, looking at the revised local development plan as well. So there is that level of scrutiny in terms of the plans being developed and any planning applications that come forward. But yeah, it's a difficult challenge the planners have, to be fair to them, because there's competing demands and sensitivities on everything they do. So, but that's the sort of support level that they're being given. Sorry.
If I could come back in, Chair.
Yes, indeed.
It's not so much as members, particularly us that sit on it, it's the residents from outside don't see that or don't hear about that. So as you can appreciate, if it's a local project, the implications for the ward member is quite substantial. And this is where we need to perhaps look at it in a different way, communication-wise, if we're doing that. Because it does have a severe impact on us as ward members, and for some of the residents, you know, continually contacting us to try and get some resolution.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I'll let Mark come in, and then I think Councillor Janet Jones wants to come in with a question that may or may not be related.
No, it's just endorsing what Steve says, because we have it on a regular basis, don't we, Steve? So, yeah, I totally support the question he's asked, and it would be good to have a response from Mark and how we can act on this, especially with our residents who don't seem to fully understand the issues that are involved. So clarification on help for them would be brilliant.
So it feels like this is something that's important in relation to communication, so I'll go to Mark.
Yep, no, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Evans and Councillor Jones. It's a really good point, and it's something that we as officers are passionate about in terms of driving forward the way we're going to change the way we work with our communities. And colleagues will always hear me harping on about we can no longer deliver services at our communities. They must be with and on behalf of our communities, and that is a step change in how we as officers and the council must work with our communities going forward, sharing that information, being there to have that discussion with our communities, co-producing solutions, and really, Councillor Evans, you're spot on in terms of that communication must be much better, improved in terms of taking our communities with us, because, as they say, we want to jointly identify the challenges our communities face and then jointly work towards achieving those goals. And we can't do that without building a confidence and trust in our organisation.
I'll give David Leach the opportunity to come in. Oh, Daniel Morelli. Sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to add, and it builds on the response that Mark provided earlier in terms of the ecological consideration on planning developments. So, you know, in Welsh planning, our ecological considerations are driven by our legal obligations as an authority to ensure that there is a maintenance or enhancement of biodiversity and that we're promoting a resilience in ecosystems as well. So that's primarily implemented through the concept of achieving a net benefit for biodiversity in all developments. So it's important to consider it in that context. I think the point that's being made is that that's not often clearly understood or communicated, and perhaps we could do more in terms of making members of the public aware that in these planning developments, in order for them to pass through, they need to be able to demonstrate a maintenance or enhancement of biodiversity value as well. So I think that's a really, really important point.
No, thank you. That helps reinforce it. So I think that's definitely a useful point that we need to pick up on. I suppose my observation was going to be that some of the examples within Section 3 give us some helpful pointers to where things have been done with the community in terms of a sort of shared benefit. So I was going to commend that part of the report as being helpful to add some detail. We had some reference to things like ABLE and some savings that Gren made, but things like as well some of the other examples around waste and getting nature. And I think also perhaps the emphasis on the work that's been done around getting to 30 by 30 is something that perhaps we should be helping to communicate to our communities. So any more questions, any final questions from members? No, I think we've given this a good solid look at, as it were, but can I just check if there's anything anybody wants to ask of any of the officers while we have them here? No. Right, well, can I say thank you then to all the officers for your contributions and the executive member. And on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you and invite you to leave the meeting now before we move on to making our recommendations.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Thanks for your input.
Cheers. Thank you. I'll let you know when they've all left. Yeah, I know a couple of members have had to leave, so thank you very much for letting us know in the chat. Okay, thank you very much. Right, so members, I know we've been keeping an eye to check that we're quorate, and we are still, which is good. So I'll open it up, really, if there's any recommendations that people would like to highlight. I made a couple of notes myself, but...
Can I suggest that Caroline comes in first, David, and see what he's picked up before we... Because we might duplicate it, if you know what I mean.
Okay, well, I think perhaps maybe Geraint and I do it as a bit of a joint effort, really. I suppose I picked up that there was... potentially it might be useful, which was the point you made, Councillor Evans, to actually show our pathway about how we're actually percentage reduction to, if you like, getting towards net zero. I think that might be quite a good recommendation to make in terms of being able to communicate the information. Are members happy with that? Is that picked up on your point?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Yep.
Chair, I wonder, because it was reported that our other partners actually contribute to our percentage, and whether or not we could have perhaps a report on where our partners are as well.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And perhaps their figures as well, Dave, because, if ours is 30%, what is theirs? It could impact ours,
Yeah, very much so. I think that's a fair point, Councillor Seaborn. Are we happy to capture that, Geraint? Yep.
Chair, you said about there's no budget now for future vehicle, charging points. I think that's something, if we want to aim to get the rates down, that we need to pursuing where we can get a budget from.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. There was a bit about the, looking back at the response on that, there was a gap on the street charging, so I felt there was a recommendation to ensure that the results of the trials are reported back to committee and what action is going to be taken. Catherine, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, no, it was basically on that one that Janet said, because I've been following the trials with the EV chargers, and I wasn't sure whether Torfaen chose not to take up the approved MAT system, or whether they wasn't given the opportunity. So I think that, we need to sort of encourage that, because that has a knock-on effect, and we need the information from those definitely fed back to us so they can sort of implement it, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. So we could actually make it in terms of perhaps a stronger recommendation that we would wish to act on the recommendations to give our citizens an opportunity, something like that. Yeah, is that a fair point?
Yeah, definitely, because I think that if for example, it came back that they worked, for example, that the approved MAT, the knock-on effect, I think, is so important in that residents would then, they could possibly have the solar panels and they could be using the energy, in their homes. So I think it has a wider benefit than just this mat. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it's really important.
So, yeah, I think there's a further point there, if I'm trying to understand that, is actually we need to be providing information to our communities in terms of what grant funding is available from where. And that there was some reference to trying to find out more about grants and encouraging, but I think that's probably a recommendation that I think you're rightly highlighting. Yeah, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Evans, Steve, and then Linda.
Yeah, that's sort of pick up on what Catherine said, really, but also the timelines which we need to try and, if there aren't any difference in timeline, perhaps it needs to come back to the committee. Yeah. Also with the, like I said, with the planning part, with the communication, particularly to the residents. And I think it's vitally important that Linda brought up the safe route to schools and the lack of funding. I mean, that's something that affects us in all our wards, so I think that should really come back as a matter of urgency if any future funding is there to take that forward. So, if we can incorporate that in sort of the funding act, recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a recommendation that we continue to actively push for funding.
Not yet.
Sorry.
Janet, that's you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Councillor Clarkson, Linda.
Yeah, I think Steve's highlighted one of mine, which was regarding the funding issues and identifying, prioritising the safe routes in communities, maybe, so that we can, what funding is available and what funding can be found. We can look at the most pressing areas, first of all. Again, the LAEP update, I think you picked up on that one, Dave?
Yep.
So I won't labour the point any further. The working towards the RLDP and the philosophy. Mark mentioned sweating the assets. More information on what that actually entails, really. Some sort of plan of how to get the progress on that, because it's all going to be crucially down to funding again. And it's great to have a plan, but again, it'd need clear identification of where those assets are, what's left that can be utilised, what could be added to, what funding could be available, and again, helping the community groups to identify where they can be more self-reliant and resilient in those areas.
Yep, thank you for that. I know Councillor Haller wanted to come in.
This is about more effective communication within our communities, saying why we're trying to achieve what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we can get those communities on board to help us achieve what we're trying to achieve. I think what we talked about active travel, with children trying to get to school and everything else, the benefits of everything that's related to active travel, that's going to reduce the carbon and the health and everything else around it. But some more effective communication within communities from Torvine saying, hey, we're 3 years away from this. This is what we've got to do, and try to get more embracement from the communities on board, get it on board, because it's great for the council to have it. But if the communities don't embrace it, and moving forward, we've got a problem, haven't we?
Yeah, I think that's helpful, and the reality is that people aren't going to read an 80-page report, are they? So we've got to put sort of messages that are clear and succinct, I think, which is the
so a clear communication between Torvine and residents on why, how, and everything else would be really useful.
Sorry, if I might throw in one that I noted. When John was talking about the procurement process, he mentioned various tools that they've got, like the film and diagrammatics guide, etc. I haven't seen those, so I think it might be quite useful that the committee could, well, that all of us could have sight of that. because that does help to see what message is going out to our partners, going back to your point, Rose, about what they're doing about emissions and things. So we might be a bit better informed if we had some of that information. So I would suggest that could be a recommendation. So is there anything else? Oh, Councillor Williams in the chamber.
Yeah, just maybe it should be that we should have some form of seminar to actually tell the whole council what we're doing and why we're doing it, to give members a more of a background on what's been done.
Okay, well, I think my suggestion was perhaps that we do have a seminar on the local energy plan, because that seemed quite a specific one. But maybe there's another one as well, Councillor Hall, about what's being done around the sort of biodiversity and the work on 30 by 30, because that tends to be quite difficult to get across to communities. Does that help? And then
I think you're spot on. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
I wonder if there might be a recommendation around updating on when, because there's quite a lot of discussion about the reporting that's not in the direct control of the council. I noticed there was mention of, for instance, when they were saying that there was an increased usage, for instance, in home working, but that was partly due to the slightly, I think they called it proxy reporting, so it was an estimated. So a recommendation of having a clearer understanding of how can you word it? It's difficult to kind of like no, it's okay. Sorry, I can't word it. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Sorry.
They did say that John's explained the work around the indirect emissions, isn't it?
Yes.
And how that they were going to go from, it was either tier 1 to tier 2 or tier 2 to 1. I can't remember which way around it was now.
I think.
But yeah, that is work that they are exploring to try and get more accurate data, if that's what you're sort of getting at, Councillor Williams.
Okay, well, I think that's probably a recommendation then, that it's good to hear what's happening around the move to get clear data through tier 2, but if we could have sort of a sort of summary of how that's being taken forward, and bearing in mind points that members have made, also sort of timelines for that. Was there anything else? There was something going through my mind, and I'm trying.
I just had one more, Chair, if I could.
Please go on.
We were talking right at the very beginning of the meeting about encouraging people to active travel, schools.
Yes.
We need some way of sort of looking at what the plan is to drive that forward. You know, how many people are taking up the expenses for EV bike travel, that sort of information, how the schools are progressing with any sort of their initiatives. And also sort of the heat pumps and everything that have been installed, some more precise data of the actual benefits there as well might be helpful. So whether or not that's a recommendation that those pieces of information are pulled together and presented in some sort of report going forward to show how successes and challenges really.
I think that's a fair point, because, you know, I think we've got some case studies here, but as you say, it would be helpful to have the bigger picture in terms of, right, how many installations have been made, how much energy has been saved, I think was the summation of what we were saying there. And before I forget the point, there was also the point that I think you made, Councillor Evans, which was around information about the opportunity for forward. I think they were talking about 10 schemes that they had funding for, but the potential to make sure that information was shared so that community facilities had the opportunity to get themselves prepared for that. Something.
Yeah, I think that was one of mine as well.
Oh, sorry, Councillor.
And it was, yeah, it was, Lynn.
Yeah. So I think that.
Yeah, we can't. Good scrutiny relies on good data, so it's how they can present that data to us so that we can evaluate going forward.
Great.
But it's how accurate the data is as well, in the, you know.
Okay, if I ask Geraint to run through, we've thrown a lot of things at him, but I think hopefully he's feeling a little more comfortable.
All right, thank you, Chair. Yes, so I'll just quickly run through the list of what I've got and fill in any gaps then. First one I've got is show our pathway, percentage reduction to net zero. We need to communicate this information. The progress and figures relating to partners also. In terms of the street charging, there are a few things that came out of that. When there was in terms of the trials that are ongoing at the moment, was to report back and what actions being taken, and that we should act upon the recommendations out of the trials to support our residents. And we need to provide information to communities regarding the grants available around that and where. In terms of planning, again, I think I'll wrap a few of these recommendations up because there was a few things, various elements of communication. There was one around planning, and there's a few more later on which I'll come to. Actively push for funds regarding safer routes. So Councillor Clarkson said about prioritising which, obviously the most important schemes and the various avenues of funding applicable to those. I think I've got this one down twice about the update on the local area energy plan. In terms of the RLDP and what Mark had said about sweating our assets, we need to plan and progress clear identification of assets and help community groups regarding self-reliance in these areas. More effective, another comms then. So more effective communications regarding communities to get them on board. As Councillor Hall has pointed around the, explaining the benefits associated, why we're doing what we're doing, and explaining about the target for 2030. In terms of the procurement process, the one you just mentioned, Chair, about the various tools, it'd be useful to include some of that in a future report, and including what sort of information we're sending out to our partners. That's the second. For some reason I wrote the LAEP one down twice, so that's it again then about a seminar. In terms of the indirect emissions and the use of proxy data, the position, it's positive to hear about. We need more information in the summary of how it's been taken forward. Encouraging active travel, need to plan how we're going to increase this, and more information around the EV bikes, the initiatives in schools, heat pumps. So more data in future sort of iterations of the report, I guess. And then the same around the funding available to communities. I think the last point. I'm not sure if I've quite captured that one fully, but.
Okay, are you happy? We've got the general theme, and I'm very happy to work with Geraint to work these up. Councillor Hall.
Sorry, Chair. Encouraging active travel and the reasons why it's to encourage those active travel.
Yes, because there's a point about health, wasn't there?
The reasons why to attract it. I get active travel, but people don't realise that there's going to be better issues or health issues that are related around that.
And stuff as well. We've worked that in. So, colleagues, are you happy we've captured key points of concern and interest? Yep. And are you happy if I assist Geraint as we work this up and on the lines we've outlined, just to make the wording a bit clearer, and we'll share those with everybody for your comments. Is that all right? Yep.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great.
We may need the help, David.
I should have reminded you that we were in formal session. Apologies for that. And thanks everybody for the questions and in-depth scrutiny. A reminder that what we were asked to consider was assess the extent to which the Council has delivered on the climate and nature emergency objectives. I think generally that was quite positive. We were looking for some extra detail and some information around the edges, I think. Determine where the areas that have been identified for building capacity and accelerating progress. We've highlighted a few of those around sort of energy generation, information to communities, off-road parking, the EV gap, which I think you picked up on Catherine, and putting our recommendations to strategic directors. So that means then that the date of next meeting is we come together again as a cross-cutting resources on the 18th of November. Gosh, we're having a meeting every month at the moment. Great, isn't it? And that will be in relation to budgets and budget preparation. So I thank everybody for their contributions, and I'll draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you.